All
This
right.
conference will now be recorded.
All right. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 6:33. And if you guys would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. All right, Jess, if you can give me a hand with the roll call, please.
Planning Commissioner Nutbrock,
Present.
Planning Commissioner Hill,
Here.
Planning Commissioner Alquashiri,
Present.
Planning Commissioner Smith.
Excused, but should be here.
Okay. Planning Commissioner Keeler
Here.
and Planning Commissioner Alternate Jones.
Here. Thank you very much. If I could, I would entertain a motion to approve the December 13th minutes.
So moved.
Second. All right, we've got a first and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll use unanimous consent. If there are no objections, we'll consider the Planning Commission December 13th, 2022 meeting minutes approved. Okay. Motion carries. We have no one on the go-to meeting for public comment. I don't see anyone in the lobby. Did we have any write-in comments? None? No fax, voicemail? Okay, letters. All right. And we also have no public hearings this month. And we have, so let's just go ahead and jump into new business. And can I give maybe Ethan the eyeball there for population projections?
Great, thank you. So this month, continuing our discussion about the comprehensive plan update, and we have two items for you. The first is talking about the population projections, and then the second item, related item, is Alec will be talking with you about the joint City Council Planning Commission work session that we're planning for February 22nd, tentatively scheduled for that date at this point. And so I think we referenced for you in some of the previous meetings, several of the previous meetings, that the state would be was working on some county level population projections. And they completed those in December. Unfortunately, it wasn't in time for the December Planning Commission meeting, but somewhere near the end of December, they completed these projections. And if you take a look at page 6 of the agenda packet, which I believe Jess has up there in front of you, I just wanted to walk through some of the details of those population projections. Since they're state projections, I guess it goes without saying that I was not involved in preparing these. I'll try and answer the questions that you have, but I don't know all of the assumptions that went behind these population projections. I think that they'll come out with an assumptions document at some point, so everyone kind of knows how these were prepared. And so we're just wanting to convey these projections to you so that you're aware that they are out there. And then the additional work that we did this month was to project La Center's population and residential land capacity, which is, we're considering just sort of a back of the envelope projection for now, kind of a gut check. So we'll talk with you a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. First, just jumping into the population projection. So if you look at that table 1 there in the memo, the projection goes from 2025 through 2050 in 5-year increments. And the state prepared really sort of 3 different projections there: a low, a middle, and a high growth scenario. And so there's a couple things to note there. One is that it extends beyond 2045. The cities and the county are only obligated to plan for a 20-year period and accommodate 20 years of growth. When the city and the county adopt a new comprehensive plan in 2025, you'll have to plan. It'll have to accommodate growth through 2045. You can go beyond. We could choose to go beyond 2045. Most jurisdictions don't do that. I think that's why they're providing the 2050 number. That's the first time, at least that I know of, that the state has decided to extend it beyond that, the projection beyond that 20-year period. We also provided for you the average annual growth rate of each of those projections, just so you can see what the differences are. There's about a 1 percentage point difference between in the average annual growth rate between the low scenario and the high scenario. So the low scenario is a average annual growth rate of 0.59%, and the high is a growth rate of 1.45%. So there's about a 1 percentage point difference there. That's a pretty big difference in terms of population projections, to have a percentage point difference. Most jurisdictions, or a lot of jurisdictions, especially larger jurisdictions, are growing at about somewhere around a 1%, 1% per year, between 1 and 2%, most often. What that results in then, if you look at 2045, for instance, there's a difference of over 200,000 people projection, difference in population projection between the low projection and the high, so that's a fairly significant number. So just changing that one aspect, the growth rate, there's a pretty dramatic difference there. So let's see here. Like I said, I'm not completely sure, because the state, I don't believe, has published this yet, but why they selected these growth rates, that's a question that we'll have to talk with them about in the future. I'm assuming it's because it has something to do with historical growth rates in Clark County, and so they're trying to peg it to that. And so that's probably why you're sort of seeing those ranges there that you see between the 0.59 and 1.45%.
So do you know if they start with a known census and just apply that average growth rate then from a known point? What's their starting point? I mean, obviously it's 2025 here, but.
Yeah. So yes, they would be using the 2020 census. But then they also prepare what are called intercensus estimates between those census years. So that may have factored into it somewhat in terms of calculating the historic growth rate. And so OFM keeps track of those intercensus estimates, and they issue those every year on April 1st. And there's a city population projection estimate, that's issued every year on April 1st. So they probably use the census year, but they may have also, looking back at the historic growth rates, used those historic estimates.
Ethan, I noticed again, they've got the low at 2025 at 510,000, and they're already saying that they're at 520. Why would that be? I mean, if
there's some difference there in the in what they're estimating, and I'm not sure why that is, but that's a good question. So let me write that down, and I'll see if I can't get an answer to that one as well.
It says potentially we could go backwards.
Yeah.
10,000. I don't think so. I doubt it. Anybody moving out? Anyways, it'd be like,
That's interesting.
that doesn't seem to connect there.
Good catch.
Good question.
So we don't know what the county is going to decide. That's what
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the next steps for this, as Commissioner Jones is indicating, is for the county to allocate, to select a projection, number one, either the low, middle, or high, or something between the low and high. It doesn't have to be exactly one of these that's listed here, as long as it falls within the two bookends. So in 2016, the county selected what they were calling the medium high projection. So back then it was somewhere between those two data points, and that's fine. They justified it, and it wasn't below the low and it wasn't above the high. So that worked out okay. So we're not sure what the state's going to do, the county is going to do, or how they're going to allocate it. So those are some pretty big X factors at this point in terms of how all of this affects La Center.
Now that this has hit the street, do they give you some indication of when they're gonna give you the next piece?
The county has said later this year. So I'm attending a meeting on Thursday, which is and I think Brian's going to attend also, which is the first city-county coordination meeting. So the county is hosting these meetings with all of the cities in the county to talk about this and the comprehensive plan update in general, and just be coordinated between the county and all of the cities. So I'm sure that this is going to come up, and perhaps we can get a better timeline. But my overall impression is that it might be sort of middle of the year before the allocations are completely done. If we're lucky, it could be as soon as March, but that might be a little bit too optimistic. And I think that there's going to be quite a bit of coordination at the staff level between the city and the county, but then also at some points there's probably going to be the need to check in with the Planning Commission on sort of the progress of how the county is allocating population to La Center, and probably also talking with the city council about that, because staff's job is to represent La Center's best interests, in these assumptions about the allocations and the 20 years of growth. And so we want to sort of put the best foot forward for La Center.
So who is the County Planning Commission hosting this? Or who's hosting this meeting?
It's a staff level meeting. So the county's planning director, Oliver Orgiaco, is kind of driving their comprehensive plan update. And so it'll be staff from all these different jurisdictions. There is a meeting later on that we're going to talk to you about that the county council is hosting, that you'll have the opportunity to attend on Thursday afternoon. So we'll get into that.
Thursday of this week.
There's
Next
a
week?
staff level meeting
it's-
Thursday of this week, and then Thursday of next week is the county. It's the public meeting on the 19th.
And this meeting, the city county coordination meeting this Thursday at the staff level, is the first of the year or the first of its kind?
First of this cycle.
When you say first,
First of the year, and
This-
the first for this comprehensive plan.
it's
update
not
cycle.
a new thing. Yeah. Okay.
They've organized these in the past for comprehensive plan updates.
So Ethan, you were talking about staff's job to represent the best interests of the city. So looking at this population projection, what is in the best interest of the city? To be high, low?
Well, I mean, that's where your input and the council's input might be valuable. Some jurisdictions want to make the best case that they can that they're going to grow aggressively, and they're willing to accept sort of more of the population allocation than some other jurisdictions. Other jurisdictions might be like, hey, we're kind of tapped out here. We don't want to grow. Put it somewhere else. Now, of course, people choose to live where they're going to live, right? I mean, there's that reality, but then there's also the impact that planning and planning commissions can make by choosing how land is zoned and used and how big La Center's urban growth area is. And so that's what you can help out with in terms of sort of determining the future, right? And then that would obviously affect people's decisions about where they live. But if somebody's determined to live in Washougal, they're not going to go, okay, La Center expanded its boundary, I think I'm going to go live there instead.
Right.
But I think you see what I'm saying. You'll still have
So
some
if the city
influence.
does have, let's say we project high and we end up with a deficit in vacant buildable land, does that help us in acquiring grants to expand infrastructure? I'm just trying to understand the ramifications of a high estimate versus a low estimate.
I mean, that could influence grant funding at some level, I suppose, in the future when the city is looking at planning for some of those expansion areas and as you say, looking at what type of infrastructure is needed. That would be quite a ways down the road. I would think like at least 5 years for some of those areas. For instance, the area that's south of La Center Road right now as you're driving into the city, there's not a lot of infrastructure planning that's happened there. And I think that's been, in the city since 2012.
You mean up towards the junction, south of La Center Road?
Correct. Yeah.
I just think we need to give some thought to what is in the best interest of high or low or medium, if there is any impact on the future of what the city can do.
I want to piggyback on what Dennis is saying, because I was thinking same thing there. I was thinking from the standpoint of UGA, the county is the one who will allow us to expand our city boundaries, correct? And so they've chosen not to do that recently. But so going along with what Dennis is saying is that if they project a higher number of potential residences, population, is that going to work in our favor to somehow cause the county to say, hey, look, we need to give them more UGA, so that we can accommodate the growth that we're throwing at them? And the other question on that is that, do we know at this point, based on our current availability of land and buildable land, because we all know that we have a lot of not buildable, unbuildable, whatever the word term is, land, what we could, within our existing boundaries, potentially generate in the way of housing, to accommodate, could we accommodate another 1,000?
Well, yeah, if you look at our last comp plan, we had a surplus of vacant buildable land. Given our population projection, we had enough buildable land to accommodate that. And so, but I think we're sort of on the bound, we're going to be on the border of that. In fact, your analysis sort of showed that. So I think the way it works, if the city has a deficit of buildable land, the only option is to expand the UGA, right?
Well, that could certainly influence the decision to expand the boundary. And as you said, Commissioner Hill, the county is ultimately in control of the urban growth boundaries. They control growth management throughout the county, and they control how big each of the urban growth boundaries are. But the city obviously has influence into that process. So if they allocate more population to us, and we're on board with that, that would be a strong case that we might need to expand our urban growth area. However, it's not certain because the Growth Management Act requires that the county look at other measures first, like can you put more population within existing boundaries before you expand them? They don't, the baseline assumption that's sort of built into the Growth Management Act is that we shouldn't be expanding urban growth areas unless we have to, because the idea is that you're preserving what's outside of the boundary, which is agricultural land and the capacity to farm and produce agricultural products, as well as protecting resource lands like mineral resource lands and those types of things that happen in rural areas. That's kind of the basis of the Growth Management Act, and that's the basis of statewide planning in Oregon as well. So yeah, that would be a driving factor for an expansion if La Center's population allocation was quite a bit more, but it's not a certainty.
So it sounds like maybe if the deficit in the table for La Center specifically, as it shows that where it grows and the deficit would encourage more maybe density type building, higher density developments and things like that before the expansion of anything would occur.
Correct. Yeah.
Or affordable type housing environments and things like that.
Yes, you're required to look at, that's a more simple way to state it. Thank you. You're required to look at some of those alternatives, like can you upzone land? Can you increase density? Is it feasible? Would you have the infrastructure to do that before you expand the urban growth area? In some cases that works out fine, and the cities are willing to and able to do that. In other cases, it just doesn't work out. But we'll have to look at that. Okay, if there's no other questions on that particular aspect of this memo, then I'm going to jump down to talking about the capacity analysis, which is kind of gets to the question that you had, Commissioner Hill, about, do we know whether or not we're going to need more land or not? So I guess I got bored one day, maybe, I don't know, but I decided that it might be a good idea to at least kind of do a back of the envelope calculation of here's what our residential land capacity is, and to just kind of see, let's stick our finger to the wind and do a very early analysis to see where we're at. As Commissioner Nutt-Brock pointed out, the 2016 plan indicated that we had an oversupply or a surplus of vacant buildable land. So what I did was I looked at the county's 2022 vacant buildable lands report, which they put out this past June. That's the most recent report that they have. They put that out once a year. And what that says is that La Center has 339.1 acres of vacant buildable residential land. And what that report also says is that based upon development patterns since 2016, La Center is building an average of 4.4 units per buildable acre. So I took that number and came up with a capacity on those vacant buildable residential lands of 1,492 additional housing units being able to be accommodated within the city, which would translate to 4,207 people. And that's based upon a average household size of 2.82 people. La Center's average household size is quite a bit bigger than, say, the county as a whole. The county as a whole is closer to 2.6. And so that's important to note for a couple of reasons. One is that the county is going to use a county-wide number when they allocate population to La Center. They're going to assume that it's 2.6, closer to 2.6 people per household, even though if you look at the state's numbers and the census numbers, La Center has closer to 2.8 people per household. So that would then reduce the if you used 2.6, you would come up with fewer people that could be accommodated on the land. So that would further sort of put pressure on the boundary, so to speak. So if you look at this table,
Is that based on kind of low density housing, or is that based on a combination?
it's just kind of an average
Just an average of overall?
Well,
overall.
it's per dwelling unit, not per acre or unit of land. It's per dwelling unit.
But it includes single family and multifamily, so it's kind of an average across those two. And La Center has a lot of detached single family residential housing and very little multifamily housing, although that's starting to show up. But multifamily housing, for obvious reasons, usually has fewer people per household than single family. So if you look at this table that we prepared, there's a 2022 population in La Center of 3,835. This is according to OFM again. And then I projected into the future to 2045 using a growth rate of 3.9% per year, which is, if you look between 2000 and 2022 and you look at OFM's numbers and their population estimates, La Center is growing at an average annual growth rate of 3.9% per year, which is huge. I mean, that's really fast. It's not the fastest in the state. It's not Ridgefield that's way up there, but it's fast. Personally, I think from experience, anything above 2% is a fairly fast growing city. So La Center then, by my projections, would have 9,238 people in 2045. That's a difference of 5,403 people between 2022 and 2045. That's a difference of 5,403, not between 2020 and 2045. And as we stated above, the residential population capacity of 4,207, that says 4,204, it's 4,207. And that leaves a deficit of 1,196 people being able to be accommodated in the urban growth area in La Center, which I think I should have taken this one step further and calculated that back to household or housing units.
427.
427. That's a fairly 427 units is fairly substantial. It's not huge, but to get back to a point that Commissioner Nutbrock made, this projection it's sort of on the margin, right? It could go either way at this point, depending upon a number of things that happen, most primarily how much population the county allocates to La Center, and then how much residential vacant buildable land we have in 2025, not now, but in 2025. And that land that we have right now a lot of it's getting used up pretty fast, right? For some subdivisions that we've been updating you on recently. So by 2025, La Center may have quite a bit less vacant buildable land than it does now. So this projection could change either way, one way or another. Don't think this is gospel right now. It's just, like I said, kind of sticking our finger to the wind to kind of see which way it's blowing. And I would say that right now it's marginal. It could be either that we don't need an expansion or that we need a small expansion, is kind of what my gut on this would be right now.
If I remember right, we didn't do this in 2016, but I'd like to see us assume a mix of low density and medium density in making this projection. That 4.4 is basically a low density.
Right.
So we ought to assume some assumption about that mix of housing type to make that projection.
Well, and like I said, this is what the county's calculating the 4.4 units from what was actually built, the average density of what was actually built between 2016 and 2020 in La Center. But the point you're making is a good one, which is that I think the future is going to have more of a mix of multifamily in it. likely.
Probably that 4-year period had primarily single dwelling.
Yep.
The other thing was, when we do this exercise, I like to go back and look at the previous version and see how good our estimates were. And, here the 2022 population is projected at 3835. If you take the growth rate that we had in the starting point in the 2016 plan, it would have forecasted 4,690 for this year. So it's just an indication of how aggressive we were. And we got to think about whether that 3.9 is really what we're going to be able to sustain as we go forward. The other thing that's interesting is we had 374 acres of vacant buildable land, and I think this was showing 377, 339. So we have obviously lost some, which you would expect.
But you would think it would be more than 40 acres.
Yeah, because there's 50 acres out there in my neighborhood that went up.
Was it 50?
And so I'm on that thing, so kind of in an average or just an estimate of what the deficit, it might require about 100 acres more needed, or it just needs to be how you think.
Either one.
It could be either one.
Combination of the two.
Combination of the
If you
two.
use the 4.4, it's about 100 acres.
Right. I mean, I guess my other question is there 100 acres available? I mean, that's reasonable for really local
Well,
land.
this says we have 339 vacant buildable.
But you're saying beyond the
Beyond
339?
that, yeah,
Oh.
Beyond that, I mean, but that's looking that requires the county to approve extending an urban growth.
Right. Yep. And I'm assuming that there is somewhere near the boundary, but I don't know the answer to, I don't have a solid answer to that question yet in terms of, is there 100 acres somewhere? I think that there is, but it's a question of where it is and which way it would be best to expand. Is it north? Is it east? Is it south? That's going to be kind of the question. Well, that's all I had on this particular item. So let us know if you have any other questions.
Interesting.
Can I just ask you, did you say your basis of this was using what kind of percentage? Was the 2.9% growth rate?
3.9 was
the 3.9%.
Going back to, I took the average annual growth rate going back to 2000 to 2020, and that's what it was, 3.9%. So I just straight line projected that into the future. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm going to turn it over to Alec at this point. And like I said, he's going to talk to you about the joint Planning Commission City Council meeting February 22nd. And he'll get into this a little bit more, but mainly what we're trying to get from you is, are we talking about the right things? It's basically what we've been talking about with you for the past 3 to 4 months. That's what we want to bring council up to speed on and then get their input on those things. So I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? I know that's been a problem in the past, so I'm just trying to get up to speed on that. So like Ethan said, as you guys requested at the previous commissioner meeting in December, we're holding that joint work session in February. And this will be a kickoff of the comprehensive plan periodic update process, as we've been doing since I think September, October, with you guys discussing previous topics like the PACP, the work plan, the schedule, population projections, and kind of giving you an overview of what the comprehensive plan is in itself. And so this will be a 1-hour event that we're planning to host in February on those topics. The purpose of this work session is to ensure council is familiar with the comprehensive plan periodic review, as Ethan mentioned, identify the roles of the commission, council, and staff, and present the periodic update schedule to the city council and get their feedback on that, as well as on the work plan and the public involvement activities as well. So staff are to highlight 5 different topics at the work session. And WSP and staff seek Commission's input on what else needs to be discussed at this work session. So as I kind of go through this, probably be wise to think of some ideas of maybe of items we can include, or maybe not necessarily needed to discuss at the work session, since we are pretty time limited. So we're gonna have to think pretty wisely what we want to include in that discussion and make it efficient but productive as well. So the first topic for the work session that we're proposing is just giving a high-level overview of the comprehensive plan and the periodic update process. So we'll discuss what the comprehensive plan is, its purpose, why it is to be updated, and when the update is to be complete. In the memo, it gives a pretty high-level overview with a little more detail than I'm providing now. But this is kind of going to be used for the city council, because this will be fresh to their eyes as well. So we're providing more detail in the memo. Again, I'm just going really high level here, just baseline topics for city council. Discussing how the state mandates the comprehensive plan periodic update with the GMA, and discussing kind of more what the GMA is, the Growth Management Act. We'll also go into details of the mandatory elements that we've discussed in previous commission meetings for the comprehensive plan, and those could be, or those are elements like land use, housing, capital facilities, etc., and how these must be coordinated and consistent with each other. And then we'll also go in detail as how, like Ethan's been talking about tonight with population projections, how coordination with Clark County and countywide planning policies will be necessary throughout the process, as well as the UGA capacity and potential amendments that we may need down the road. So then our second topic.
Question there.
Yes.
I see the note in there that for some reason the economic development and parks and recreation elements were funded at the state. What does that mean for us?
They were what? I'm sorry, I didn't.
It says the economic development and parks and recreation elements are listed as mandatory, but the state indicated these were not funded.
Not funded.
And therefore not mandatory. So
if you look at the Growth Management Act, it has a list of required comprehensive plan elements, and it lists parks and economic development. But then if you look at some of the state's guidance material, it says that those updates to those elements haven't been funded by the state, so they're not actually required. It's a little confusing.
So what does it mean they weren't funded? They weren't funded for the counties to actually do the work to incorporate those into their comp plans?
Right, right.
So again, my question, what does that mean for us? We're obviously doing our parks plan right now.
Right. I think that there's maybe some other RCWs somewhere else that say that park plans are required. We already have both a parks plan and an economic development element. So that's not going to stop us. We're going to update those.
So we're going to update them. Okay.
Things anyways.
We need to be consistent anyways.
Okay.
Good question. So we'll dive into our second topic after giving that high overview of the comprehensive plan, going over the work plan, which we've talked through a couple commission meetings as well, and how this is one of the first steps of the periodic update process, and how the work plan is divided into 3 phases in each phase, and what goes on in each phase and the different tasks that go on in those phases. And staff will provide an overview of the work plan and where the city is currently with the work plan and where it is going down in the future, and just getting some feedback on that from city council. It's recommended by the planning commissioners to create a document that's easy to read and navigate. So we got pretty good feedback from you guys on that, and have a pretty good living document as it stands. But again, we just want to see what city council thinks and have a fresh set of eyes, and maybe to see if that's true to them as well.
So you're going to show them the schedule?
Yes.
I guess my concern is we've got an hour.
Yeah.
And if you just flashed up there and say the schedule exists, you can look at it at your leisure, that would be one thing. But if you start going major
It's a lot.
elements, you're going to get
Buried in the weeds.
The thought was to talk about kind of the major phases and task, but not get into the line by line of it.
Here's my thought on this. There's a lot of material to cover.
Mhm.
We got to try to do it in an hour. I would like to see somewhere, and maybe it's coming, that says these are the 10 points or the 10 things we want you as a city council to kind of give us thumbs up or thumbs down or something on. We're having this together. We want to walk away with you nodding your head saying, yes, proceed with that. Yes, proceed with that. No, proceed with that. Do more work here. Do something. Because if so far, to me, it's informational,
Mhm.
which is good. But if we're going to be having this togetherness with them, I'd like to see where we're actually trying to get them to commit to some bullet points that says the council or the planning commission and the staff are recommending that we do the following 3 things. What are your thoughts on it? Can you give us a yay or nay? Can you give us thumbs ups on this? Can you give us thumbs up? For the purpose that says we don't want to be heading down this, taking a right turn down here when you're going to come back and say, no, I don't want you to go right. I want you to go left. So that ought to be somehow our message to them that we're really doing this for the purpose of getting them to give us some direction. So as we move forward, we're going down a path that makes sense for the city. And we're not going to be backtracking and so on. So I'd like to see, anyways, you get where I'm coming from on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think probably in my mind, one of the biggest ones in that category is the public involvement plan.
Mhm.
You know, they ought to be participating, make sure that we're being as transparent and get as much input as we can. That's one that I'd like to see.
I'd like to see that too, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm almost to that
Yeah, I see
topic,
that. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I agree that's one of the big ones as well. It's a big piece of the puzzle.
And I would downplay the schedule as just in terms of
right.
just some very top level bullets of here's how we're going to be tracking it. And,
Yeah.
oh, by the way, we've got the detailed schedule if anybody wants to
If
see
you want
it
to look at it.
as we're making progress.
Okay.
Give you a copy.
The other thing that I didn't see here is, this plan is supposed to be defining where the community wants the city to go in the future. And the plan in each one of the elements has a list of policies. And I would like to get some feedback from the council if those are the right policies. And you're not going to be able to do this in a 1-hour meeting. But what I was thinking is give them a task. Go read the thing, and we want some feedback on whether these are the right policies. And maybe we make that as an action item for our next meeting.
Yeah.
But they're the policymakers. They ought to be giving us some feedback on whether we got the right policies in our plan.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts on all of this. First is that at this early stage in the comprehensive plan update, this joint meeting with the city council is mostly informational. I think that the public involvement and communications plan is sort of one of the exceptions, and they can certainly give us feedback on that in terms of the events they want to see, what the messages are that they want to put out there to the community. There definitely is going to be another workshop with the council that we're planning in the fall timeframe, September, October, to talk with them about the policies. We can sort of give them the homework of reading the plan and at least getting familiar with it. But I think that probably in that fall timeframe, it would be more ideal to talk with them about the policies at that point, because then they'll have the background information to kind of be informed about all of these issues: housing, land use, land capacity, maybe transportation and parks plans will be drafted in some form at that point. So we're absolutely on the same page with you, Commissioners Nutbrock, and and Hill. But I do think that this first meeting with the city council is probably 2/3 informational and then 1/3 what do you think? But we're definitely going to get to that point where we're asking them, are these the right policies? Are these the 10 things we should be focusing
And I agree,
on?
this is not the time to do that. But, we've got 4 new council members that have probably never seen the document.
Yeah.
I think we need to be setting the expectation that, oh, by the way, there are policies in here that should be guiding how we move forward. And we need your feedback, and we're going to expect that in September.
Right. And I'll put an explanation point behind that. Your introduction, I think part of your introduction, Ethan, to the city council is the fact that one of the main reasons we're doing this is we're going to be looking for guidance from you as a council. We're going to be putting a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of effort into this. We want to be sure we're going down the right road, we're doing the right things. And we're going to be looking to you to give us some guidance and direction. Not today, but there's some material you can look at. We can provide you material to look at, but it's important that you recognize that as we move forward, we want to be going down the road that you're kind of saying, keep going.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my 2 cents on this.
I think
my
that's-
observation has been that, we put a lot of time and effort into these plans, comp plan, parks plan, traffic plan. And I'm not sure they influence policy at all. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I would bet that the council doesn't know what's in those plans. And they should, because it's what we're putting all this effort into for them to help guide where the community goes in the future. And so I would hope this might be an opportunity to educate them that it's there, what's in it, it's important.
And I would like to say, as the planning commission, I think we advise the city council on what we would like to see in these type of land use things. So I wouldn't necessarily be looking for a whole lot of guidance from the city council personally on this, more as seeing eye to eye, but maybe we're going to be the ones advising them.
I think you're right there, but they recognizing though that they need to be thinking through this process with us and making sure that that we don't get some of this thumbs down, like, what are you guys doing?
Right.
That's not what we want. We don't want to go there. We don't want to go do those things. No.
To get on the same page.
Yeah. Just make sure we're on that same, I think.
I think it's definitely a mix of the two. And I think that as the update process progresses, there's going to be members of the community, especially landowners, that are going to approach the city council and say, look, I have 80 acres or whatever here. I really need to get included in the center's urban growth boundary, and so they're going to start hearing from those types of people, and then they're going to need to have sort of a framework for thinking about these things. So they'll probably get involved and they'll probably have some feedback for us. And then there's going to be some issues that are, especially housing, that are a little bit more difficult to accommodate. You remember that the center's obligated now under the Growth Management Act to project the housing need for all different housing types, including emergency shelters and permanent supportive housing. And so that's going to generate some discussion, I'm anticipating. And so I think that they'll have some input on some of those things as well, even though they might not now realize it.
Okay, I like you lost control.
That was my fault.
We used all your time up, didn't we?
Yeah, no. I can just go quickly through the rest.
You're good.
Oh yeah, it's fine. So speaking of the PSCP, since kind of we already went through the work plan and schedule. So again, the PSCP, the public input and communications plan that we've been working on with you. We that will be a big piece with City Council to see if our ways of engaging and soliciting feedback from key stakeholders and the community are effective ways. And those activities will be discussed with the City Council. So we have those open houses, the joint work sessions, possibly doing a survey. Also noticing on different mediums such as the Columbian, on the website, on the reader board by the roundabout, and so forth. Another item we could discuss with City Council is maybe those identified key stakeholders. It was mentioned in the previous Planning Commission meeting that that list is pretty broad right now. So maybe either adding some or taking away different key stakeholders that may not be necessary to engage with this process, but being effective at targeting those key stakeholders that will provide the best policies or feedback or input in general on the comprehensive plan periodic update. And also with the work plan schedule and the PACP, I have updated those to include this joint work session coming up in February. And those are going to be kind of more or less living documents that are to be updated or to be amended a bit as we go through this process, because we're learning more. Like today, we learned about the population projections and how that might really affect our urban growth area. So you might need more engagement with a specific key stakeholder, or with this joint work session coming up, we may come to terms that maybe we need to do that survey and need to explore that option more, other alternatives for communicating with the public. So again, just showing how these documents need to be updated as we go through this process, and I'm doing that actively as we are moving through it and trying to keep up to date on those documents. And then the final topic is the population projections. I'm not going into detail with that because Ethan just did that, but we do plan on presenting that at the joint work session, just an informative item again, and just kind of how those population projections really impacts a lot of the elements of the comprehensive plan and how those will impact it and may impact policies of those elements as well. And that's basically it. So are there any additional questions you guys have? Maybe are there other topics we need to discuss, or topics maybe that we should eliminate that hasn't been discussed as of yet?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's not so much another topic, but just from this discussion, I assume, so has the council not been made aware of this, what all we've been talking about yet, or it's not much on the radar?
I think they may be generally aware the city's obligated to do a comprehensive plan update. It may have been mentioned to them, but this is really kind of the first opportunity to sort of drive some of this home for them. We're still a little bit early in the process. A lot of jurisdictions, like I think Ridgefield, and I guess I can't really speak for them, but my overall impression is that some jurisdictions are a couple months behind where we're at right now. I'll find out a little bit more about that on Thursday, but we're still sort of out ahead of the 8 ball on it. But yeah, this is kind of the first significant opportunity to update the council on it.
So the joint work session seems to be an informative meeting for the council of these 5 specific areas. And it may be somewhat repetitive for the commission, but there is a purpose or a role of the commission being at this meeting, or does this need to be a joint? This is a joint meeting because we're just to work together as a team to merge. So we may hear some things we've already heard, but that's okay.
You'll definitely hear some things that you've already heard over the last 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
But I think as the commission has said in the past months, having city council's input early, making them aware of these things early may generate additional discussion and start teasing out some of what's most important to them, and therefore the types of policies that we're going to write into the plan and kind of their overall direction to the planning commission on the comprehensive plan update.
I
So
think,
that,
He's asking what's the point of them being.
Oh,
you know, when Jeremy said, for me, I think it's, the message needs to come clear to the council. And I think that all possible, all of us need to be present to show them that how serious we are about this, our role as a planning commission and our role in this update, you know, and how important it is. We want to hear how we want to be sure that we're hearing from them and in tune. So if only 2, 3 or 4 of us show up, they may get the idea, well, this doesn't seem to be very important. And it is important, obviously. So I would encourage all of us to try to work that out to make it there, or send your representative, your wife or somebody else.
So that's tentatively scheduled for the 22nd,
February
Wednesday.
22nd.
and that would be at 5:30.
Yeah,
Where at?
would be here in the city
here.
council chambers.
So it'd be 5:30 to 6:30.
Yeah, it would be before city council.
Yeah, so they get an hour before their regular meeting and then they continue.
Oh, so it's got a start and stop point.
But Jeremy, I think to sort of finish answering that question, sorry, Commissioner Smith.
no,
The communication needs to go both ways. And so one of the reasons that one of the roles that the planning commission will have there is you can tell them what you feel is important about this comprehensive plan update. Not necessarily about, hey, I think we should have this policy or that policy, but in terms of the things that we've discussed, the PICP, the work plan, what you know about that and why, what it was that you discussed, what comments that you brought up when we discussed this with you. It would be good for them to hear those things. For instance, in the PICP, you said, hey, it would be great to have a business forum to bring the business community into that. It would be great to advertise this on the reader board. Those were some of the comments you had. And so it would be great to bring some of those things up again, because then that'll start them thinking about, well, what is the right way to get the public involved in this? And they'll see that you're engaged in it. So I think that that's one of the roles that you'll have at the meeting.
yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm asking, will there be not so much work, but just joint introduction together in a bit of discussion, yeah.
We're definitely going to leave time, so it's not going to just be
Presentation.
staff talking the whole time. And so that's going to, further compress the time that we have to present, which gets to the comments that Commissioner Hill had, especially about, hey, you really got to focus on the most important things here. We received that message loud and clear. So we want to leave at least 15 minutes, if not 30 minutes for the Planning Commission and the City Council to ask questions, share information and thoughts back and forth on this, and if that for some reason results in us finishing 10 or 15 minutes early, that's okay too, because maybe at this point, perhaps they won't have that much to say, but it's better to leave that time for them to comment and ask questions. So really our presentation is going to be 30 minutes or less, and probably interactive in some ways. If they're just listening to us talk for 30 straight minutes, then that's going to be hard for them to ask questions right after that. So I'm going to encourage them and you to ask questions sort of as we proceed through the topics.
Bring a hard copy of the plan in. Hold it up. Here's your plan.
And here's all the other elements that go with it, right? Break the table.
Yeah. I was going to suggest to us as a planning commission also, if you guys have time before that meeting to, the city archives all the past meetings. And so maybe, look at the, maybe not the whole 2 hours, but if you just watch at least good segment, you guys, you had no choice to be there for a while. But yeah, if we just watch some of the archive ones, I think it would be good just to understand, who's there and how they run.
Yeah,
just for us.
good recommendation.
And it's all on the city's website with links. Thanks to someone else, Jeff. He's very diligent.
I just need a little clarification. It's not a big deal. I've heard a few comments of and I might be missing something, city council directing the planning commission on the work that we'll do on this plan in the future. Is that correct? Is that how that will work?
Well, the planning, and Brian can jump in here as well, but the planning commission is an advisory body to the city council, meaning you can make recommendations to them, but you don't ultimately have the authority to decide things, to adopt codes, to adopt the comprehensive plan. You can make a recommendation to them on those things. So I think that the comments that were made, I think mainly by Commissioner Nutbrock, was that he wants to be sure that because we're going to put so much work into this, and I guess it also came from Commissioner Hill, that we're not going to go down some path, assuming hey, we're going to convert all of Northwest La Center to commercial lands or something. I mean, we wouldn't do that, but just as a crazy example, and then all of a sudden 2 years of work down the road and the city council said, what are you doing? We're not going to do that. So I think that that's what the idea is in terms of them providing some input and direction to you. But because we're talking to you monthly and your job is to understand these issues more so than city council and advise them onto it, the advice and recommendations are going to primarily, I think, go from planning commission to city council, then some coming down from overall direction coming down from the city council to the planning commission, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And they do this for the budgeting too. I mean, there's a budget commission. I think Commissioner Hill is on that. And so, just digging into the weeds on things it would probably be very overwhelming to them. And since it is a volunteer role, city council, it'd be very hard for them to get in the weeds. So we kind of prep it, set them up for the alley-oop, and they can dunk it if they want. Or they're like, oh, you didn't set that up very well. We're not going to dunk it. So, they do the same thing with budget. But you were probably familiar with that.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. I just, with this specific update of whether we were looking for some direction on, before we get started on anything. And it looks like we are.
Yeah.
Let me try to respond. I don't anticipate them on their own giving us direction at all. I think I see what, as a planning commission, help of our team here, we present before them things that we believe that things that we as a commission feel strongly about, and we're looking for them to get nods one way or another. But they're not going to be in a position, I don't think, to give us any kind of direction. I think they're going to give us head nod that says, you're on the right path, keep it going, looking good, like what you're doing, I like it, keep us posted, versus, wait a minute, I think I heard something, I don't think, talked about that, because I don't think we were talking about going that way before,
Right.
That's how I see it. I don't really see them as give us, do this, do that, do this. Now, we do get that direction that we have in the past from the mayor, who said, I want you to look at these items, go out and research this, go do this, or we need a new code for this, or whatever. And that may come down as a discussion out of the council, but normally it comes out of the mayor's office. Those kinds of things that gives us kind of direction, says, hey, we need to have you guys kind of look at this, reopen this, or that type of thing, based on, he may be getting some heat on some things. And he hits us up and says, we need to work on this and maybe try to fix this issue, which may be a code change or whatever. But as far as I don't see the council giving us direction as I think maybe you were thinking maybe they would. I don't know if that answers you.
Well, I guess where I'm coming from is, like I said, the comp plan is all driven by policy. And we're not a policy-making body. And I think they ought to be giving us some guidance on those policies. And I know how the policies were amended last time. We took the previous plan and said, well, that one's already done, that one's already done. There was no comprehensive look at the policies that are going to drive how this community is developed over the next 10 years. And I think the council ought to have their fingerprint on that. They give us a policy, we go figure out how to take that policy and implement it in the plan. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
That's a good way to say it. I think that's a good way to say it.
Any other discussion? I was going to hand it back to Alec if you guys are good.
I'm good too.
Good?
So, yes.
All right, then.
Thank you.
I'll just throw the final point in there, sorry, is even if just this joint meeting enables maybe some of the newer members of city council to understand this is happening, because they tend to be the go-to for like anyone in the city, like, hey, why don't we have more farmland, or why aren't we as rural? And so they say, hey, did you know this thing's happening with a comprehensive plan, and planning commission's kind of running the show on that? You should go to that meeting. So if you even got them to see that, I mean, I think it's a big win for us too. But thanks guys for the
Good point.
good input from everyone.
So I mentioned earlier that there's a Clark County meeting, not this Thursday. I had it incorrect initially. It's Thursday, January 19, 1:30 to 3:30. They're kicking off their comprehensive plan update publicly. At that point, you can see this on the screen now and read it, but there's both in-person and virtual attendance options available. And so we would encourage you to, and we can send the link, or Jess can send the link.
Please send that out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
To you, but this will sort of help gel some of these concepts we're talking about in terms of coordinating with the county, population projections, and all of that. But we just wanted to let you know about this opportunity. Alec or I'll probably attend just so we kind of know what's going on. Obviously, we need to do that, but wanted to make it available to you as well. And I believe that they're having somebody from the state, Dave Anderson, who heads up the Commerce Department, which is ultimately responsible for making sure that jurisdictions update their comprehensive plans on schedule. Isn't that in this somewhere? Or was I? Maybe it was on it. So maybe we'll see if we can't dig up some more information for you on that also. But yeah, the point is that they'll have somebody from the state that also knows about comprehensive plan updates from that perspective, talking about it and to talk about what cities and counties are obligated to do. So that'll be kind of a good 101 on all of this as well.
Where is the in-person going to be held at?
I think it's the, yeah, so that's the main county services building there. 6th floor hearing room, which is kind of where the board meets there. So I think that's all we had on these two topics for you.
Good discussion.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for the input.
Thank you.
I think that'll work. You want me to give the community development report?
Oh, sorry, I didn't move us on. I was like,
Maybe he doesn't want to hear from me.
I was like, Ethan, anytime you're ready. I'm sorry. I put a lot of burden on you guys, so I just thought you just keep it and run with the momentum. So sorry if you could move us into, well, you know what? Really quick before we hop into that, there was actually one piece of business which is not on the agenda, but Commissioner Smith, last meeting, you were nominated and elected as vice chair, but you weren't here to accept. And not to put you on the spot, but do you accept?
I accept.
All right. I think officially we're good on that. So I feel much better now. It was in the back of my head. I was like, I should have brought that up under old business, but it's okay. With that, Ethan, if you don't mind helping us out with the community development staff report, I'm kind of annoyed you couldn't read my mind.
No worries. Okay, just want to touch on a couple things. The first item is number 37, which is the Aces View subdivision. I think we pretty much brought you up to date on that one last month. There was a hearing, or the city hearing examiner issued the final decision on December 12th on that. That was approved. I think I mentioned the oak tree issue on that one, large oak that's being preserved in a park track. Valley View subdivision had a hearing that's item 44. The Chicken Ranch, as some folks call it, had a hearing last week. And that was approved. That's a 34 lot single family residential subdivision.
Did they decide that barn wasn't historic?
We conditioned them to undertake another study because the first study that they did was basically like the archaeologist walking out on site, seeing these buildings and then going, hey, those might be historic. You should evaluate them further. So we conditioned them to evaluate it further. So they're going to do that prior to final engineering approval. They, right before the hearing or a week or so before the hearing, they submitted a letter from their architectural historian saying, this is what that study is going to contain. We don't think it's going to result in a recommendation that the buildings be preserved. We think that other experts in this field would agree with us. So we wanted some kind of input on that because we didn't want to get down the road and then have somebody say, those really need to be preserved. You're going to have to redesign this entire subdivision. So we wrote a condition on that with sort of a escape clause in it that basically says we can do post-decision review if for some reason one or more of these buildings are recommended for preservation. Now, I don't know that the city would choose to do that, even if there's a recommendation for that. I'm just kind of letting you know how this works because the city doesn't technically have a code that regulates historic buildings. So we may not have the legal authority, the city may not have the legal authority to require somebody to preserve buildings. That's for a future discussion, but I'm just telling you what was kind of in that condition of approval.
Okay.
So the farmhouse that is there, that's planned to be demolished as well.
All the buildings, yeah. It's a beautiful barn and a beautiful house.
I love seeing that barn coming down the hill.
Yeah. Highland Terrace, I think we're waiting on some information still from them. Brian, is that you may have the most up-to-date status on that?
Yeah, we're waiting for some additional information on some easements for the final plat review for phase 2.
Did you see where that developer finally had to pay his fine?
Yep. Yeah, there's been a couple
Big time.
articles in the papers. They're actually, it's in lieu of a fine, they settled and they're providing close to $100,000 to a water quality habitat project in the watershed, basically, of the East Fork.
It's a wetlands bank, isn't it?
No, it'll be some sort of stormwater or creek restoration project. So we'll kind of keep our ear to the ground on that too.
So is that the same developer as this one here?
Yes. Yeah, they sort of had a notorious issue with stormwater over 2020, 2021.
The item 49 is the Vineyard Vista subdivision. It was a pre-application meeting that was held on December 7th, and the notes were subsequently issued on that. That's way up there on North Fork Avenue, and so they had a concept design for about a 100 lot subdivision on that, also single family detached residential. There's a huge grove of trees on that, some oak trees, a creek with steep ravines on it. There's all kinds of critical areas on that. So they left the pre-application meeting. They're trying to figure out how to balance all of those things in their site design. The item 51 is the Advanced Builders Site Plan Review fourplex. And they also have that same applicant owns a lot immediately adjacent to that. This is right behind the Palace Casino, more or less, on the E and 4th Street, D and 4th Street area. And both of those lots are proposed for fourplexes. One has an application submitted for the fourplex, and then the second one had the pre-application meeting here recently, which is the one closest to the Palace Casino. And so one of the primary points of discussion on that one was how they access the lot, because if you look at a plat map of that area, if you go on Clark County Maps Online,
No road.
yeah, funny thing you'll notice is that the Palace Casino's parking lot is in public right-of-way, multiple public rights-of-way near this property. And so the question is, if this property is going to be required to do street improvements, does that impact the Palace Casino's parking lot, and how does that work out? We had a discussion with Steve Michaels, the owner of the Palace Casino. So that's still kind of to be determined in terms of how that works out, but that was kind of one of the major things that was discussed at that pre-application meeting. And then here recently, last week or so, we received an application for another sign permit for the Stone Hill Coffee House. This is a projecting sign that would attach to their building essentially, or their stair framing. And we reviewed that fairly quickly and actually issued a decision today on that. It's just a small 10 by 36 inch, sorry, blade sign basically that would project out from the building. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions on that from commissioners?
No, great. Appreciate the update.
Yeah, excellent. Well, appreciate it again. We're just roll right into planning commissioners' comments. I always kind of favor the right side, but I'm just going to stick with it. Commissioner Nutbrock, any comments?
Nothing, thank you.
Commissioner Hill?
No, thank you.
I have nothing. I'll just thank everyone like I normally do. Commissioner Smith?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Keeler?
I just wanted to say that the work that you did preparing us for the joint work session is appreciated. I think it's a great framing of the priorities for us and for them at the same time. And I'm looking at us just, our role, as far as I can tell for the commission, is to just kind of lend legitimacy to the plan that we have all discussed. And we are in favor of proceeding. So thank you for that work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jones?
Amen.
Well said. As far as regular agenda and work sessions, I just wanted folks to know when this is for commissioners, when I text you, I'm not trying to hold you to it. I report to these guys like, yes, we have a quorum. And so what I'm looking for is at least 3 people to say yes. So just so you know, I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, like, you better come. It's just, I just want to, because we'll call it off if at least 3 of us don't make
Yeah,
it.
I
So.
feel like tremendous pressure from that.
But you know, with all the angry emojis, angry devil emoji. And so with that, if there are no objections,
I was gonna
Thank you.
add
Thank you,
something
Brian.
to
sorry, I should have given
1.11
you guys a
there.
shot.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
So at our next meeting, we're planning on bringing some information to the Planning Commission regarding the Parks Plan update. We have a consultant that's been working on that. We have a community survey that's currently open. So if you haven't had a chance to go take a look at that on the city's website, please do. We're also going to be sending out a mailer to, we've got about over 100 responses so far throughout to the survey. We rolled it out at the tree lighting event, so it's been open for a month or so now. Getting some good response, but obviously we would like as much input as possible. But in any case, we will have that consultant presenting to the Planning Commission sort of where we're at in the process and next steps, and sort of starting to get some information and feedback from the Planning Commission as we go through that process through the next 6 months or so at our next meeting.
So they're just getting started? Is that how you characterize it? Or?
I think that's a fair spot. So there's been some existing conditions review, and then right now we're in the information gathering stage from the public. What kind of parks, trails, and other recreation facilities does the public want to see that we should incorporate to that plan? Then once that survey, we have that data from the public and that survey is closed, then we'll take that and roll it forward into the new plan. And that's when we really start getting into the thick of the plan update.
Okay, so they haven't got to the level of service analysis yet then?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I did also want to add real quick, for the next meeting, it does fall on Valentine's Day, and
Oh, yeah, I
to
forgot about that.
avoid
What's that?
not having a quorum or having to cancel. It says for holidays, we can just push it to the next day. We conveniently do not have a city council meeting the next day. So obviously it would be up to you guys to just push it one day to avoid any issues when it gets to that day.
I can.
The question is, do you have any plans that night?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm taking this as a reminder to make plans.
Maybe I need to go on.
Next day is
Yeah, by the way, next.
I think at my house, the wife would like me to come to planning commission. She's like, no, you can't let the city down.
Our wedding anniversary is the 15th. So that-
Nice.
So move it to the 16th is what you're saying.
No, I think we're fine.
So
Do you
fine
guys
with
want,
the 14th or fine with the 15th? I know I have a commitment on the 15th as well.
so we have 2 committed for the 15th. I'm okay with the 14th.
I'm okay.
I don't want
okay
to put
with
it,
14th. It's fine.
I don't want to put anyone on the spot.
Whatever's the most trouble.
We're like, we're near, yeah, I'm about to hit like 28 years, it's, but,
Partners
So-
and
so it sounds
spouses
like
can
we're-
always just attend.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
what
yeah,
I'm just
what
saying.
about,
Come on, baby, let's
what
go
about
this
staff? I could ask you guys to put you guys on the spot.
we'll be at work, I guess.
This probably sounds really bad, but Valentine's Days always sound very canned to me, and I just avoid that. Going out to eat or whatever. We another time. So we're fine with the 14th.
Perfect.
So I think I'm
I'm
hearing
fine with the
consensus
14th,
that
I should say.
14th, that's a really good point, Jess. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be the day before and you guys are like, actually, I can't be there. And we have, especially because we're going to be scheduling someone outside
Oh,
of the city
that's a
to
really
be
good
there.
Should we call him really quick? And
No.
him or her and make-
I think I know he was okay on the 15th, but I'm sure we can accommodate. So I was guessing we were going to move it. So, but
Oh.
So our guest has already been invited for the 15th.
well, we were just talking preliminary plans.
Okay.
So I'll follow up. If there's some issue with the 14th, then we can regroup via email and have Jess lead that.
Yeah.
So maybe one question on that, not to draw the discussion out longer, is the 16th would be an alternate date. So if the parks consultant can't do the 15th, maybe we should ask if the 16th is okay. And I'm okay with the 16th. And I may not have much of a role in that meeting because you'll probably want the parks consultant to have as much time as possible, I'm guessing.
16th would work potentially.
I'm gone on the 16th, but I can call in.
Okay, so we're a tentative yes, 16th?
If we have to, yeah.
I can do the 16th.
Are we
Mr. Smith?
putting aside the 14th?
The
Well, we'll plan on the
16th would work
14th,
well.
but if that doesn't
Really?
work for
Yeah.
the parks consultant, then
Thursday,
we'll roll to the
We stick
16th.
with the 14th unless it doesn't work, huh?
Yeah, okay, so we go in with the plan of the 14th, but if,
And
Uh,
16th is a backup.
okay, you guys are okay with that then? 14th and Phil. Okay, I'm good. I think that's great.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
One other question, could you send also just a link, I know it's on the website, but for that park survey, I want to try to encourage our neighborhood
Oh, sure.
to do that, so if I could just get an easy link for that, that would be great.
There's going to be 10 parks in your neighborhood someday.
They're like, there's like 87 Mike Joneses in or, like the made up name. All right, anything else before we adjourn? All right, so we've completed our agenda. If there are no objections, we can adjourn.
So,
Hearing none,
so be it.
we are adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, guys.
Very good.
You need this page.